welcome back. It's good to see you.
Great to see you,
especially on this day. How are you?
Yeah.
What do you make of this?
Well, markets don't like uncertainty. They like visibility. They like moats. So markets are a little scared today. To me, it's an overreaction. I mean, NVIDIA decline is the worst since March 2020, and we know that ended up being a huge opportunity for investors. So I think it's not a fun day, but I'd be looking at this as an opportunity.
I've been thinking about, the people who've been coming on today of all sort of professions, whether it's a strategist or investor or whatever, analyst, defending all this or saying it's overblown. How do we know? What if it's not? And if it isn't, what does that mean?
We don't know if it's overblown. You're right. But this is the nature of technology. I'd be personally surprised if NVIDIA became Betamax in the past week. I mean, that's really would be the kind of change that would be required to really justify selling NVIDIA here. And given, I think, the need for AI because of global labor shortage and NVIDIA chip dominance is still strong, unless a new model emerges that doesn't require GPUs entirely, I'd say that markets just generally do fire ready aim. I mean, I think it's hard to know, though.
I won't disagree with you on that. I mean, that's how the market tends to do that. But a lot of AI was sort of sold to investors on a hope and a dream, right? We haven't seen, in many cases, the ability yet to monetize all of this, or at least to have a sizable return on the investment that a lot of these hyperscalers are make tens of billions of dollars that they're pledging to spend. Doesn't that matter? I mean, what if some of that hope and dream just doesn't come to the degree that we thought, or we decide that it wasn't worth the money that we were willing to pay for it?
I mean, these are fair questions. If NVIDIA was at 100 PE, I'd probably say that there's too much good news priced in, but the PE is around 30 times. I'm not sure that that's very demanding for investors, and if you look a couple years out, it's in the 20s. I don't think NVIDIA is priced for perfection.
Is the market itself?
I don't think so. I mean, the 10-year now is backing off to 4.5, so you're still paying over 20 times for a 10-year bond. The median PE in the S&P is around 18 times.
Yeah, but I mean, because it's skewed, though, because of the mega caps, we're still like 22-ish times. So, earnings have to be really good from here on out, right? Don't tell me about multiple expansion again driving this train. You got to put up or shut up when it comes to earnings this period.
That's right. But, I've been researching companies since the early 90s, so over 34 years. I never found a PE for a high-quality company to be at 22 times, let's say for Mag 7, to be a demanding multiple. Again, I think if you're talking about price for perfection, it really has to be stocks where you have to back into the NPV of 100% earnings growth forever.
What happens if, at bare minimum, we are questioning NASDAQ stocks for the foreseeable future? It just doesn't feel like, tomorrow everything's going to be great kind of deal. So as long as we're doing that, is there enough momentum behind some of these other areas of the market that this market as a whole can be okay?
Well, today, market breadth's actually pretty good.
Yeah, financials, healthcare, staples, they're green. Dow's up, almost 200.
That's right. Even in NASDAQ, we have stocks that are up.
Yeah, Apple, Uber, Meta, yeah.
And I think that year to date, we have 3 weeks in, and year to date, Bitcoin's outperforming, small caps outperforming financials. So I think the market does look pretty healthy. I would say it's also very encouraging that if we can close on the S&P above 5881 by the end of this week, it really solidifies that 2025 is going to be probably a double-digit gain year.
Now let's talk about, Dan, the epicenter of all of this. And you've been a notable bull on many of these companies, many of the technologies that are at the center of the meltdown today. Does this worry you?
I mean, in my view, it's a top 3 buying opportunity that I've seen in the last decade for tech. And the reason I'm saying that, I spent the whole weekend talking to tech executives, CIOs, individuals that I know that are going down the sort of AI arms race or going through use cases. In no way of really 25 companies does this change their sort of plans, and a lot of these could be 7, 8, even upper 8-figure type budgets. I just continue to view this as It's a model, and a lot of the details I think still need to be vetted out in terms of 6 million. Do they actually have the H100s, how they actually built it? But this is something we're going to look back on, and I think the street and the market got this way wrong. In no way does it dent our bull thesis. That's what we've been telling clients really since the weekend. These are the times you own these names.
Dan, not all of the companies at the center of the sell-off today are necessarily affected the same way. Chip stocks, NVIDIA, Kelly mentioned it, $500 billion in market cap lost. That's more than the size of ExxonMobil. That's roughly the size of United Health Group in terms of an entire company lost in market value. Some are affected more than others. Mega cap technology, not as much so across the board as, say, NVIDIA per se. When this is a buying opportunity, how much of a buying opportunity and how specific do you have to be?
Well, first on NVIDIA, that continues to be, I think, the golden goose in terms of what Jensen and that company are ultimately. There is one chip in the world. There's one GPU that's fueling AI, and it's NVIDIA. And when you think about these build-outs, when we talk about the enterprise, the $2 trillion of AI CapEx next 3 years, that doesn't change from DeepSeek. You know, we're talking about 1/1000th of ultimately the build-out that you're going to need for a lot of these enterprise use cases. You look at names like Palantir, you look at the hyperscalers. I could argue with inferencing, if you actually think costs are coming down, it's actually bullish for even some of the software players, names like Salesforce, ServiceNow, Oracle, and others. I just think this is when you look at NVIDIA, I think we sit here 6, 9, 12 months from now and look at this as a moment. It was a golden buying opportunity, and in no way changes our bull thesis for where this is all headed.
Chip analyst Stacy Rasgon of Bernstein. It's great to have you on a very important day to speak with you. What do you make of this story? What is the worst drop for NVIDIA, at least in years?
Yeah, you bet. So I spent a lot of time this weekend, most of my weekend looking at this. We knew it was going to be a circus today. That was pretty clear, just given everything, all the takes that were there in the Twitterverse. I had sort of 3 conclusions. It's my own conclusions from this as I'll call it like a semi-informed layperson around this. But number one, I think the big issue was that the headline, the initial takes that came on this was, oh my God, China's duplicated OpenAI for $5 million, which is categorically not true. We can talk about what they did, but they did not train this reasoning model for $5 million. That did not happen. We can talk about why. But number two, how did they get the efficiencies that they did? These are very, very good models. Like, I don't want to discount that. But the types of things that they did, they are not miracles. They're a mixture of experts, and they did some very interesting with something called multi-headed attention, and they use lower precision calculation. These are all things that are known, and all of the labs are all working on, if not deploying already. So there was nothing here that was like unknown to anybody else, like in the AI industry. Like, these are not miracles. Finally, like number 3, I personally think, we'll talk about this, I think that this is clearly a panic today. I think it's overblown. The school of thought here is that, like, oh my God, these are so much more efficient. Like, we don't need as much investment. So number one, we actually don't know what they're spending to train the reasoning model that's causing the angst. My suspicion is quite a bit more than what they did to train the base model. And number two, you got to remember, like, I'm a semi guy. Like, I actually view cost reduction as a good thing. We want adoption. Like, in semiconductors, again, I'm probably biased, but like, cost fell by a factor of 2 every 2 years for 50 years. It was not a bad thing for semiconductor. It was a fantastic thing for semiconductor, man. Unless you think that we were already close to saturation in terms of the amount of compute that was going to be required for AI, we need these kinds of innovations and efficiencies, because otherwise, like, you're not going to be able to get to where they're going anyways. And so I think this was already happening. I think it needed to happen. And I can make, I think, a very clear argument that the more efficient things get, the more demand we will have, not less. So I actually think over the long term, this is a good thing, not a bad thing. But clearly the market disagrees today. So that is what it is.
I mean, NVIDIA hasn't been afforded the multiple it has, nor the stock price, for that matter, on the idea of a commodity. Has it? Hasn't it been rewarded the way it has on the idea of the best, of a moat, on some level of exclusivity, at least now?
Well, the issue here is not that. Where is the commoditization and the? It's not the chips. It's the models, right? So again, if your business model going forward is we're developing AI models that we're going to sell to the general public, maybe you worry. Like, I don't know. It doesn't mean that like the folks that are doing this still don't need to buy a lot of chips. I think they're going to still go to buy a lot of chips. And by the way, what did we see last week as all this was happening? We saw Facebook or Meta, I guess, massively take up their CapEx guide. We saw all the Stargate stuff. We even had China actually announced a 1 trillion RMB, so like roughly 140 billion US, a program for AI investment in China. This was all last week, right as all the DeepSeek stuff was happening. DeepSeek's not new either, by the way. The V3 model, the base model, was actually released on December 26th. Like, none of this is new. None of this is surprising to any of the large US guys that are spending all this money. They're spending it anyways.
Yeah, but I mean, NVIDIA's future in some respect is leveraged to the development, the production, and the success of Blackwell. If the company is telling you it's, I'm going to read a comment from a spokesperson at NVIDIA, which I think speaks to this, and we can discuss on the other side, where they say DeepSeek's work shows how new models can be created, leveraging widely available models and compute that is fully export control compliant. Now, you could read that and say, well, is the company admitting that you don't need the latest, greatest, most expensive chip to do what DeepSeek appears to have done?
No, I don't think that's what they're. So they're making a statement on China here because that came out of China. But look, you're going to have, like, if you're getting a massive proliferation of models, frankly, of all shapes and colors and sizes, you're getting adoption. This is over time what we want. Right. This is not, again, this is not a bad thing. You're going to hear this a lot today, probably already, but there's a concept known as Jervin's paradox. The idea is as efficiencies and costs come down, like, demand more than offsets. I keep going back. You know, I went to the Hot Chips conference a couple years ago, and Bill Daly, who's NVIDIA's chief scientist, was giving the keynote. And he was actually talking about performance improvements in GPUs. And he talked about, like, over the prior 10 years, NVIDIA had improved GPU performance by like 1,000x. And it was a bunch of things, process tech and architectures and sparsity and lower numerical precision, all kinds of things. But what he said in that keynote was, like, over the next 10 years, we want to improve the GPU performance by another 1,000,000x. Like, again, unless you think that we are at the limit of what the compute that we need, I think this is a good thing. And if you look historically, we've never, ever had enough compute. Like, I've got the data going back even before AI was, like, taking off, just looking at, like, sort of installed compute in the data centers, like in MIPS and millions of instructions per second. I have this data going back like 30 years. It was growing at 50% a year forever. It never stops. So I'm personally not of the belief that you can have enough compute. I think if we're getting efficiency gains, which I think we need if we're going to meet the compute demands that AI and accelerated compute are placing on us, I think that we're going to get absorbed. I think we need this.
But you don't
think that there's a limit on compute needs.
Maybe not, but there might be a limit to which some are now willing to pay for these chips, which are very expensive. So is there a price issue potentially to think about? And then the obvious margin issue. I mean, the reason they're making money hand over fist is these chips are expensive, and everybody thought they needed as many of them as they could get their hands on.
I still think they're going to need lots of chips. And in terms of, like, their ability to price, it comes back to exactly that same point. How much can they improve performance? So if I'm going to make up the numbers, but you kind of get it. You look as NVIDIA went from, say, Ampere to Hopper, and the price, I don't know, kind of doubled, like whatever it was. But the performance improvement was something like 10x. So that was a massive, like, NPV positive investment for their company, for their customers, and they sold them hand over fist. And if you look at Blackwell, and again, they don't really sell GPUs, they sell servers. But if you wanted to sort of suggest the GPU price is going up, 50% or whatever it is, if you look at the performance metrics for Blackwell versus Hopper, they're going up anywhere from 3 to 30x, depending on what you're doing. So the same thing, a massive improvement. And these are efficiency gains, too, that, like, nobody seems to be complaining about. My own belief for NVIDIA pricing and margins is, as long as they can continue to improve the performance, that is sort of the cap on what they can raise pricing on. So as long as they can keep performance going up at a good clip, they can keep pricing going up and they can keep margins. I worry about, this is why I don't really worry about competition and everything in terms of driving margins down. If we're ever reaching a point where they can no longer improve performance, then I really start to worry about their ability to price and their ability to drive margins. But it comes down to the same kind of trend. I think we need compute. I don't think we can have it. I don't think we can have enough compute. And again, in that context, I think the sell-off today, given these kinds of dynamics, this idea that this is just over efficiency is going to completely swamp the need for the good. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's ever been true.
We'll see how it all develops. I appreciate so very much your
yeah.
insights, Stace. Thank you very much. Stacy Rasgon. All right, welcome back. Shares of NVIDIA sinking by now. You know that story. China's DeepSeek rattling the market big time. The company shedding $610 billion in market cap, the worst single-day market cap loss in its history. Joining me now to discuss Intelligent Alpha's Doug Clinton, NVIDIA, his top holding. It's good to have you back. Appreciate you coming on, especially today. Not pretty when you look at the screen or your balance, I suppose, in the holding. What are you doing with it?
It is definitely painful. And I know one of the things that we've talked about before, Scott, is, I still believe, too, that we are in this 2 to 4 year period where it's still an AI bull market. Today obviously makes you question that reality, but I still think things are intact. Obviously, you've talked a lot about DeepSeek and all the ins and outs, the puts and takes of it here today. But the bottom line for me is this. I think about it as the hyperscalers are not competing with DeepSeek. They're competing with each other. They have large balance sheets that they're willing to deploy if those investments in infrastructure and NVIDIA chips generate better models, and I still think they will. And so I don't think the AI trade is dead. I don't think the chip trade is dead, but it may take a little while before investors get more confident with it.
All right, I hope you're all doing well today and staying calm in this market. I'm going to recap most of what I said in today's first video about NVIDIA and DeepSeek because not much has changed since then. First, let me be completely upfront. I'm not fully convinced about all of the things we're being told about DeepSeek right now. Something is not adding up. I find it very hard to believe that a team with a $6 million budget was able to develop an LLM that rivals those produced by US megacap tech companies such as Microsoft, Meta, and OpenAI that are spending billions upon billions of dollars on this. Now let's say hypothetically that DeepSeek's are one is comparable to ChatGPT, Claude, and the other well-known LLMs. Even if that is the case, I have a hard time believing that this LLM was created with only a $6 million budget and old NVIDIA hardware. Keep in mind that right now, there is an AI race happening between the US and China. And similar to what happened during the space race, both countries are vying for dominance in AI. Both countries want to be able to claim that they are in the lead when it comes to AI innovation. With this in mind, we have to be very careful about believing every claim that we hear. Now we know that there are strict export controls in place for NVIDIA chips to China. And we've also known for a while now that China has been using alternative methods in order to smuggle the latest NVIDIA chips into mainland China. With this in mind, listen into this short clip of Scale AI CEO Alexander Wang from this past Friday.
The Chinese labs, they have more H100s than people think.
And these are the highest powered NVIDIA chips that they were not supposed to have.
Yes. My understanding is that DeepSeek has about 50,000 H100s, which they can't talk about, obviously, because it is against the export controls that the United States has put in place. And I think it is true that, I think they have more chips than other people expect, but also on a go-forward basis, they are going to be limited by the chip controls and the export controls that we have in place.
This is the big question. Is DeepSeek using high-end NVIDIA GPUs or not? If DeepSeek is in fact using tens of thousands of NVIDIA H100s, then that changes this entire situation. And it means that this whole sell-off is just a bunch of hoopla about nothing, at least in regard to NVIDIA. If DeepSeek is not using a bunch of high-end NVIDIA GPUs, then that changes things. Right now, I think the entire market's knee-jerk reaction may be a bit overdone. Of course, I could be wrong, but I think there are serious questions regarding the claims made about DeepSeek that we need definitive answers to. The main question is whether or not they're using a large number of high-end NVIDIA GPUs and simply not saying anything about it publicly. If that is what's happening, then I think the sell-off in NVIDIA today is just noise. The next event to pay attention to will be megacap tech earnings later this week, when some of NVIDIA's largest customers report earnings and give their CapEx guidance. Microsoft, Meta, and Tesla are scheduled to report earnings on Wednesday, January 29th after market close. If they are still planning to spend tens of billions of dollars on CapEx this year, then I think that could help calm a lot of market participants' current fears. Right now, there is a lot of uncertainty in the market, but remember to remain calm and do not make any irrational decisions. I have serious questions about some of the claims made about DeepSeek, but only time will tell whether those claims are true or not. In the meantime, remember to remain calm and do not make any hasty or emotional decisions, because that will cause you to lose money. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about DeepSeek and NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.